Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. We're off the record.
That's always, in today's world, you're always off the record, right?
So a week ago today, I launched a new newsletter at CNN called Pacific. And the focus of it is the West Coast tech and innovation economy. And when you launch a newsletter, you really think about your target audience. You think about who the smartest people in that world are, what they care about, and what they want to read. And my target, there's no one who more fits the bill for my target audience than Eddy Cue, because he is at the intersection of innovations in technology, innovations in media. He flies on a near weekly basis, I would say, between the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And he's thinking a lot about this sort of big picture future of where we're going. And you just broke some news.
We did. It's a great day for us. We announced that we did an acquisition this morning of Texture. Texture is an app that has been in the iOS store. It's beloved by our iPad users because you get access to all of the great magazines from Condé Nast, from Time, Meredith, Hearst, and we just did an acquisition.
So are you shocked that acquiring publishers that this news didn't break earlier? It feels to me like nobody leaks more.
Well, this is one where it was about them, so maybe that had something to do with it. So
how does acquiring Texture advance the grand strategy of Apple News?
Well, I think that there are a few things that we always cared about in Apple News. First of all, we wanted to bring great articles from trusted sources in a beautiful layout. And when you look, that was the premise of Apple News that we started with, which was if you do that, then lots of customers will use it and will love it. And obviously, Texture, with the brands that I just told you about, they have magazines from Esquire to Vanity Fair to Time to Sports Illustrated, some of the best magazines in the world. So they have some incredible content, and content that takes a long time to create. So they're in-depth articles, and so we're really excited about bringing that into Apple News to augment all of the content that we have now from thousands of publishers. But the key to ours is about curation. We want the best articles. We want them to look amazing. And we want them to be from trusted sources so that we don't have a lot of the issues that have been going around in the marketplace.
So there have been a lot of issues going around about trust in media. Usually when people talk about who owns the media right now, people talk about Facebook and Google just because their share of the advertising revenue is so high. Obviously, Facebook seems to be retreating from the news space, or at least sort of recalibrating what they're doing. Do you believe that Apple News can sort of step in and become the top news or the dominant news player in the digital space?
Look, today for some of the publishers that we have, including some very large ones like CNN, we already account for 60-70% of the articles that are read across the web and other services. So we've become a pretty decent sized player in a short amount of time around it. We also started where our customers that we're reading were following about 4 publishers in Apple News a year ago. Today they follow more than 20. So there's been tremendous growth in Apple News. And so we just want to continue to accelerate that by bringing things like things that are startups like the Pacific to things that are so big like, Condé Nast.
So the question of curation that you talk about, companies like Facebook and Google have been hit hard over the question of their sort of the tension between wanting to remain open platforms where anybody can post any sort of news and not wanting to limit free speech. But that's a really tricky bargain. I mean, that's a really tricky game to play. Do you have any thoughts on how Facebook and Google have tackled this news problem? Do you think that they have been robust enough in did you buy their open platform argument, or do you think that they needed to be more aggressive in terms of curation?
Look, it's always hard to sit from the outside to talk about others. I do know that for ourselves, when we've got into this, we think when you have a large platform there's a lot of responsibility. And we've always taken a great deal of responsibilities for our platforms, starting from iTunes when we did the music store, to the App Store, certainly Apple News, podcasts. And so we had a bunch of rules. We came up with guidelines that had to be followed in order to participate in there. And at times we got a lot of heat for it. People weren't happy that we had guidelines. The other part is that nobody is completely free. There's no such thing as free. There's no pornography on any of these sites. So people do draw lines, and you can decide where you want to draw the line. We do think free speech is important, but we don't think white supremacist or hate speech is free speech that's important to be out there. We don't
True.
We don't think, for example, we denied bomb-making apps. Apps that were submitted into our store that would, teach you how to make a bomb. We just don't think that's something we want on our platform, and so we draw those lines.
Your line, the NRA fell on the right side of your line when it came to Apple TV. So their channel is still there. And obviously there was a great deal of pressure on a litany of media companies in the wake of the horrific school shootings and shootings that we've seen. Is there a reason you kept NRA?
Yeah, what we do is we draw a set of guidelines that are published, so everyone in the world can read them. It provides very detailed of what are the guidelines that you have to follow, and those guidelines apply whether you're CNN or whether you're a one-man shop developer, and we follow them across the board. We have a team of people that review every single app. And when I say a team, it's not just one person. Multiple people review every single app as it goes through to make sure that it follows the guidelines. If it doesn't follow the guidelines, we obviously don't allow it in the store. If it changes as it's in the store and it violates our guidelines, we take it out. So when we look at any of these apps, we look and see whether it follows the guidelines. And we do think it's important. We have certainly the NRA TV app. We also have pro-gun control apps in our store. It's important for America and the world to have debate on certain issues from that standpoint. But if it falls off, I'll give you an example. From day one, we decided that we did not want our app store to be a place that you buy and sell guns. And so we don't allow apps that allow you to buy or sell guns. We don't allow apps that show cruelty to animals. We don't allow violent apps that are showing doing things to human beings. And so we draw those lines, and then we, like I said, we make sure that we review every single app and that it comes in and follows our guidelines. And again, free speech is something we stand behind, and it is important, but that doesn't mean it's everything.
Do you think that other companies like Facebook, Google, or even Reddit have a responsibility to draw clear lines?
I think everybody has a responsibility in the world. So I don't, certainly that's the way we feel. We take a great deal and think a lot about the decisions and the guidelines and the principles that we want to run our company in, from things to the environment. I think in today's world, I think companies have to take responsibility, and we're going to step up and do that.
So what happens when people start coming to Apple News and there's a perception, because you're in California and because of some of the decisions you've made about the more radical forms of conservatism, that Apple is a progressive company and they're not a reliable source for news? How do you counterbalance that?
Sure. I think you make sure that you provide, again, trusted sources. And so you could, I've gotten lots of emails that say our Apple News product is too far left, and I've gotten lots of emails that our product is too far right. It depends on which articles people are following and which are their sources. And so we do want to provide different viewpoints. One of the things that we wanted to do with Apple News is not just provide the news that you want to read. And one of the reasons we can do that is we're not advertising focused. Mm-hmm. Right? So Apple doesn't make any money on advertising through Apple News. In reality, it's very small amounts. So we're not after trying to get you to keep reading the same thing over and over again to try to give you more ads or any of that standpoint. We wanted to create a little bit of serendipity, a little bit of information so that you could see all of the different things that are out there. And so we try not just to give you the most popular thing for you, but some of the articles that you should be reading that are in depth, and we let you decide if you want to follow some of those sources. If you don't, you can eliminate them, but we want that serendipity. I know when I used to read the paper, you'd pick up the paper and you start reading it, you'd always find articles that if you had asked me ahead of time, am I particularly interested in that topic, I would have never identified that topic. And sometimes that's getting lost now because we just want to give you only what you want and the same thing over and over
So
again.
you're bringing back the newspaper.
Not quite, but
An aggregated newspaper. What do you
one that fits like this big and it's really...
What do you read? What like personally, just you?
Yeah. Well, there's the personal interest, and I start my day by picking up the Apple, not surprise, right? Apple News app. And one of the things that we do is we pick editorially what are the top 7, 8 articles for the day that you should be reading in the morning, the top news from that standpoint. And it's covered from a variety of sources, and those sources change all the time. And what we're trying to look for is who's really covered it in an in-depth way, more than just giving you the sort of headline, or we don't try to do any kind of clickbait on the title of the article or anything like that. And so it's a great way to get up to speed right away. Mm-hmm. And then certainly I get email newsletters now as of last week, the Pacific, but I follow, I'm a big sports person, so I read The Athletic, which is a local team sports thing. I'm also a big car guy, so I read a lot of blogs around cars. So it's a variety of things, but a lot of it falls right into Apple News because we get it from all the different sources.
So let's keep talking about acquisitions. The Textra acquisition is a big deal for Apple News. Let's talk about Apple TV and the sort of grand strategy here. You are sitting at the top or near the top of a company that has a market value of $910 billion, give or take. I'm sure you have more up-to-date statistics. You could, it seems to me, conceivably buy Netflix. You could even buy Disney if you wanted to. Do you want to buy Netflix or Disney?
That's great. Look, the good news is that both Netflix and Disney are great partners of ours and have been with us from the very beginning. Look, generally, the history of Apple, we haven't made huge acquisitions, and generally we haven't done.
Why? Why haven't?
Why? The reason we haven't done that is we tried to go. It's the old Gretzky quote, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is. Right. And so if you're trying to go to where it's going, then generally you've got to figure where is that, and what is it that you want to go build for that. And so when you think of TV today, most of us here in the audience and around the world get their TV via satellite and cable predominantly. Netflix has done very well, and others have done, but when you look at the number of hours that are being watched, it's coming through that mechanism. If I sat here today and I asked people to raise their hands, how many people think that will be true 10 years from now? I think you'd see a lot less hands than the ones that are here, because you can feel the change, you can see the change, and some of it is because you've got devices with you all the time that you want to be able to watch. You know that people today don't want to watch advertising. People skip ads all the time. They don't really like ads around it. You've got things like setting up a DVR, which is just brain dead and crazy. I'm old enough to remember the first time we got a VHS machine in our house, and you had to put the timer and set the clock, and then the tape would run out, and you wouldn't get the last part of the same thing happens with a DVR, just a bigger storage. Why is it that I can't just call things on demand? Mm-hmm. The technology is there. And so we think there's a real change coming in the marketplace as to where people are getting it. And one of those places, as you can see, is apps, right? Netflix is all about an app around it. Another thing that you see is things are much more global. Mm-hmm. I'm in Austin today. If I want to watch certain things that I pay $200 to $300 for a service, a satellite or cable service, it might be blacked out because I'm in Austin, or it might not be available. I mean, I pay $9.99 for a streaming service. I get it anywhere I am in the world.
Right.
So there's just a lot of these things that are going to get solved.
So I recognize skating to where the puck is going to be. At the same time, you have made a number of content acquisitions that do feel pretty traditional. I mean, you've got the Reese Witherspoon, Jennifer Aniston project. You have Damien Chazelle. You have a Steven Spielberg documentary, I believe. You got a number of other things that sort of look like the acquisitions that an Amazon or a Netflix or whoever might make. So I think Netflix learned at a certain point that you had to go all in on celebrities, actors, actresses that people knew, showrunners that people knew. Netflix just paid Ryan Murphy $300 million. There is a feeling that you have to have this huge, enormous tentpole project. Why are you doing these sort of like staking little claims in the content space? Why not just go big and buy Netflix?
Well, we're all in. We're completely all in. There's a difference, though. We're not after quantity. We're after quality. We don't try to sell the most smartphones in the world. We don't try to sell the most tabs. We try to make the best one, and hopefully the other piece happens. And so when you think of content, first of all, and you can see that here in South by Southwest, great storytelling is what's important. And you get great storytelling from big name people, and you also get it from new and up and comers. But you need to have a great story. I learned that in the early days when I was really, my whole background's computers. I got to meet Steve. Steve was running Pixar at the time, and Pixar had done like 2 or 3, 4 hits in a row. And I said, like, why is Pixar always doing hits and yet others are not? And we talked about the fact that it's all about the storytelling. And if the story's not right, they go back and do it again, and they get it right. And so great storytelling is what's important. And so what we hope we're doing is that we hope we bring some amazing, great quality stuff. We'll have a few surprises. We think there's a real advantage in technology. We'll talk a little bit more about this as we talk about like sports and the TV app. We think there are ways to leverage technology to make the viewing experience even better.
But in terms of premium content, do you need to have, if I look at every other company in this space, the logic suggests that you need to have a big tentpole project. So HBO is chasing its Game of Thrones spin-offs to try and maintain what it's doing. Amazon spent $270 million just on the rights to Lord of the Rings. I think Netflix has The Witcher that it's working on. There's this sort of sense that in order to be dominant in this space, you have to make a really big investment and start spending, $10 to $15 million per episode on some grand fantasy project. Do you guys?
Again, we're making big investments. The financial part of what you're talking about isn't the issue. The issue is to find the right ones. And the way we like doing things is not to throw 100 things up against the wall and see which one's going to be good or not. We hope certainly, obviously you want hits and you want things that are very popular, but we want things that are of great quality, and you can see that. And I hope you'll be able to feel that and see it. It doesn't mean everything will be a hit, because you don't know that. But everything should be very, very high quality, and I think that's where we will stand out.
You also spoke about how Apple does not have a history of huge acquisitions. One reason to not acquire Netflix would be the fact that they're $20 to $25 billion in debt, and that's a lot of debt to take on. Isn't
that a reason not to, or
a reason not to?
Oh, okay,
that's
sorry.
What I'm saying. Yeah, no. But conceivably, you might think, well, look, $25 billion, we could do that ourselves. Would you rather go this alone? Do you feel like you're smarter than the competition? You could do this your own way?
Again, I don't think it's about being smarter. I think, we like doing what we think we know how to do and what we can be great at. And we had some ideas on it. Honestly, one of the things you also have to realize for yourself, for example, is we don't know anything about making television. So what skill sets does Apple bring to that around it? And the viewpoint is very little. There's other things we bring. We know how to create apps. We know how to do distribution, all those kinds of things. We know how to market. But we don't really know how to create shows. And so we were cognizant of that, and it took us a very long time. I was looking for somebody to head this up for more than 2 years, because what we wanted to find is somebody who really knew the business but was willing to also think of it differently, and where we wanted it to go. And we were very lucky to hire recently 2 executives that joined our company, and now we've got a team. We've hired about 40 people now. starting internationally now in the last month and a half we've started. And so we're building what I think is a, incredibly talented, capable team of creating great quality.
Jeffrey Katzenberg at WanderCo is creating what he calls new TV, and it is focused on, his belief is that where the puck is going is towards content that is 2 to 8 minutes long. Not hour-long series, not 30-minute series, but do you, when you start to think about the future of media and what role Apple plays in that, are you thinking about that 2 to 8 minute window as much as you're thinking about shows like the ones you've acquired?
Well, I don't think 2 to 8 minutes is where the puck is going. I think YouTube has has taught us that. I think there's a difference. I think there's things that you only want to see for 2 or 8 minutes, but I don't think you can tell stories like Game of Thrones in 2 to 8 minutes. And I think one of the things that you're seeing is you're seeing tremendous interest in TV series, even over movies at times, because you're able to develop characters, you're able to tell a story in a longer form, and people are really excited about that. So I don't see that as the world is going to go from 30-hour shows or 2-hour movies down to 2 to 8 minutes or around it. Again, will there be 2 to 8 minute things? There are. I like cars, for example. 8-minute reviews of a car is really great. I don't really want to sit for an hour watching a car review, but 8 minutes is great.
Right. Let's talk about live TV and sports. What do you guys have planned there?
Well, one of the things that we've noticed, it's easy because I'm a huge sports nut, so it's great when you get to build products for yourself, and sometimes you feel like. But one of the things about sports that you get, if you're a huge sports fan, and some people won't like me saying this, you don't really care what channel it's on. What you really care about is the game. And so I'm a big Duke fan, so what I care about is I want to watch the Duke game. If it's on ESPN, great. If it's on something else, great too. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is to make the whole sports viewing experience change. And what I mean by that is I want to get an alert when the Duke game starts, so to remind me that it's there. If you're a sports fan, for example, and you're a Duke fan, you care about the ACC, which is the conference they play in. And if there's a close game with 3 or 4 minutes to go, why am I not getting notified on my device where I could just tap and watch the last 3 minutes? Every sports fan wants to do that. If you like golf, even if you don't like golf, there was a tremendous amount of interest in Tiger Woods this weekend. The coverage started on TV, I think, on the 9th or 10th hole. Tiger birdied the first hole on Sunday to get one from the lead. No one got to see it unless you were doing it in an app because, again, the ecosystem changed. And so all of these capabilities are coming in. And so what we try to do is take this TV app as the focal point for people to come in. We've done live news. We do all of the VOD stuff, but we've taken and created a really in-depth sports piece. And no better time to do that, obviously, than this Thursday with March Madness.
Who's the greatest threat to Duke?
Iona, because that's the first game. If you know anything
you can beat Iona. Can you beat Michigan State, and can you beat Kansas?
We'll as I always remind people, don't worry about who you're going to face, because you might not be there or they might not be there. But look, our Duke team is capable of beating anybody, as they've shown. But it's hard to win 6 games in a row.
So do you see the Apple's relationship with sports as we can provide what we do very well, which is the sort of push notification stuff you're talking about, or do you want to do what Amazon and Facebook are starting to do, which is actually acquire the rights to games and start owning that content yourself?
Right now, we want to augment the experience. We think the experience of sports can be so much better. You want to be able to watch picture-in-picture, all these technologies. The crazy thing is none of the things I've talked about, like a DVR, all these things about finding out the team to follow. The Warriors were playing a game. I'm a huge Warrior fan yesterday. I forgot about it. The game was close. They were playing at Minnesota, and I got a message, and then I tapped, and I started watching. This isn't rocket science. The stuff has existed. It's just not been the vehicles haven't been there. So we think there's a huge opportunity to grow all the things in sports and make them more interactive, lots more capability that are there. And we'll do it with Amazon. Amazon Prime, for example, is on the TV app. as well as we'll do it with CBS or ESPN. ESPN's about to launch a new app that'll be joining the TV app, which is great.
What is the augmented reality experience for sports?
Well,
5 years from now, 10 years from now, sooner?
I'll tell you the sooner one. PGA just announced an AR app on ARKit 1.5 for the iPhone today. So that's one that's sooner. And what they're trying to do is give you a sort of a view of the golf course and the shots that are taking place in an AR experience around it. And so what AR lets you do is it lets you see the action in a different way than just a two-dimensional view of a TV. And so, for example, one of the things that you can, since we're talking about the PGA app, if you've ever gone to Augusta for the Masters, which is coming up, on TV that looks like a fairly flat place. And it's extremely hilly. But you don't really see that on TV. In AR, when they're showing the shots, you can actually see the golf course and see all of the different hills. And so you get to experience it in a way that you've never seen before, and you can appreciate certain things that you haven't seen before.
Are there other, let's talk about augmented reality generally. What is Apple's, what's the grand strategy for AR? What investments do you hope to make? And what does the experience for an Apple user look like in a world where AR is sort of commonplace?
Look, one of the problems with technologies like that is that it's hard to sort of build that and start, because you start from ground zero, meaning there are no devices, so you got to sell them all over, and so the ramp up curve is really hard, because developers don't want to spend the money until there's enough people, and you've got this whole issue back and forth, is it good enough? And so these technologies tend to start really slowly. One of the things that I think we did that was really, really smart is we thought about this years ago as we were building iPhone 6s, and we wanted to build AR technology into those phones, even though we didn't have any AR yet, because we knew we were working on it. And what we wanted is, when we announced our AR capabilities, we wanted it to work backwards to the phones that people had. It wasn't just the new phones that you had to buy. And so what that did is, last September, we announced ARKit. And if you were a developer, basically you had hundreds of millions of people on iPhones and iPads that you had access to if you were building an AR app. And so what's happened is we've now got over 2,000 AR apps in the store, growing at a very fast clip as people are learning about it. And you can reach hundreds of millions of people, as opposed to a small set. And so there have been some cool apps. There's a great app that I just saw that was one of the difficulties of buying clothes, for example, online, is everybody's body shape is different. And so you look at a shirt and which size is it and how well does it fit? And so you can take an AR thing and have a picture of yourself and take the image of the clothes and put it on your body and kind of walk around it and see what it looks like and what it shows, doesn't show. And it's really great and easy to do, and it just makes the whole buying experience online that much better if you're selling clothes.
Right.
So it changes the dynamics. You look at cars. I just saw something that Porsche is working on, where if you want to go buy a car, you do a lot of the research now online. So it used to be you'd go to the dealer, all that. Now you do all the research online. But what's the experience of sitting in the car? What are all of the buttons do? Where are they? What are the controls? How does it look? You can do that right now at home and get the full experience and change the colors, how it's going to feel when you're sitting inside the car, if the car has a black interior versus a tan interior or a white interior. And so all of a sudden the experience is completely different. And that's not something you can even recreate at the dealership, because they don't have every color combination there. Right. And so it just really enhances all of the experiences you can do. And so we have the most devices that are AR capable in the world today.
Are you really bullish on AR as something that just becomes an integral part of our life, or do you think there's still going to be some resistance to it? I mean, there was a moment in which everybody thought VR was the future, and now VR seems like just a huge headache to put on a headset.
Look, I think AR is we are very, very optimistic and think it's going to be huge, and partly because it's not an immersive experience. It's very difficult, for example, for being in this room and all of us being wearing goggles. It kind of would look a little weird. But you raising your phone, Major League Baseball did this. You raising your phone, pointing it at Dylan here, and having it come up with stats about who Dylan is or how to subscribe to the Pacific, for example, which you just mentioned, is really, really easy and really fast to do. And it doesn't take away from the experience that we're having here of interacting live. So we think AR is absolutely a very mainstream product and something that you're going to use all the time, every day.
Speaking of which, how long do I have to look down at my phone or hold my phone up? Like when can we graduate to a point where I'm just wearing something or I'm just seeing things?
Well, I've been working at Apple. It'll be 30 years at the end of this year, and so I hope to spend at least another 20 years there. And so I'm not gonna answer any questions on future products.
Well, one of you probably won't answer this question either. But one of the many companies that get cited as a possible Apple acquisition target is Magic Leap. Do you feel like the future of AR is wearable technology, or are we still going to be walking around holding up our phones?
Well, look, again, phones aren't going away for a while,
Okay.
If ever. Around them, having a screen, having the capabilities that you have of touch, there's a lot of dynamics that the phone is just an incredible device, and it's hard to believe. I just said been there 30 years. The iPhone is 10 years old. It's not like we've had it for a lifetime here. And think of all of the things that it does for you, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, and all of the capabilities and things that it does for your life. And so when you start thinking of what is it that's going to take its place, it has to do all of those things as well or better. And I don't think that's the case in any of the things that we're talking about around it. So it's an incredible device, and there's lots of places where, it doesn't mean that you're not going to want to talk to Siri to the phone, but that doesn't mean that everything is going to be talking. You're not going to have everybody in this room, many of which I can see, or have a phone. They might be looking up and down at it. They're not going to be talking to it. They want to touch it. And so, this is an incredible device and has a long room, and we have a lot of capabilities and things that we're going to keep adding to it too.
So to go sort of big picture here for a sec, 10 years ago, since you bring up the iPhone's 10 years old, and for much of the last decade, this sort of enthusiasm around any product launch, iPhone or any tech product launch, has been, it's just, there's been this sort of celebratory atmosphere. I would say, given everything that's gone on with Facebook and Twitter and Google and fake news and sort of larger discussion about the effect that social media has on society, there's also a question about what these devices are doing to us, and everything from, whether or not we are capable of paying attention for more than 2 seconds at a time to actually like our body structure and our, my like lumbar structure. I know there's a lot of excitement about all the products you work on. Do you worry about the effect that these devices are having on society? Do you worry that maybe, an 8-year-old kid or a 4-year-old kid shouldn't be, have access to an iPhone?
We absolutely do. And this gets back to how we started this conversation. With big, successful platforms comes great responsibility around it. And so this is something we've cared about from the very beginning. So you talk about iPhone and apps, for example. We did parental controls. We put each app has an age rating to it. This was something we came up with. Apps didn't have that before. There's no movie industry to call it PG-13, for example. So we did that. We did it so that a parent could approve every app that a child wants to acquire on their phone, so that they can click buy, but the parent has to approve it around it. So these are things we've cared about deeply from the very, very beginning. We added a feature which some of you hopefully have seen, which is Do Not Disturb. Because there are times when you're, if you want to do something great and you don't want to be interrupted in the world, you turn on the Do Not Disturb and your phone will go silent. we take one of the things we don't want people to do is to text while they're driving. And so we created this driving mode now where when someone texts you, it just responds back saying you're driving and, we'll get back to you and I'll get back to you. So these are all things that we've built right into the products because they're really important to do around them. Now, at the same time, we need to make sure that the parents have the information and the capabilities and for them to decide. Because things aren't always as simple as they look. Not every 10-year-old is the same. Not every 14-year-old is the same. And so parents have to decide what's the right thing for them around it. But that's something we care a lot about in our platforms.
Do you have immense influence? Do you fear regulation?
Look, I think our company is different. We're different than what you're talking about. We don't. First of all, our customers' privacy is of utmost importance to us. We're not collecting a ton of information about you, what you do, where you are, et cetera, around it. We're really not interested in it in most cases. And when we do, we keep the minimal amount that we need in order to do exactly what we're telling you that we're going to do with it. We don't make our money off of advertising. So we're not trying to, again, find out where you're shopping, what you buy, what you don't buy, all of that standpoint. It's not what we do. So a lot of the regulations that you're seeing kind of goes to both of those issues. And so I think we're in a better position because our businesses aren't in that. Our businesses, you love our products, you pay for them, you buy them, and then we give you that product. We don't try to collect money from it on an ongoing basis.
Do you think Facebook and Google are irresponsible in their data collection of their users? It's always difficult to answer the question about somebody else because you're not there, you don't know exactly what they are or aren't doing around it. And so I don't want to answer, I don't want to say what they are or not doing or whether they're irresponsible. I think we focus on what we're doing and communicating it to the customer and hopefully letting the customer decide whether we're doing it right or not. And I think that's worked really well for us. Okay.
If you look over the last 10 years, when we started talking about privacy and security and all these things, they weren't top of mind. And in a way, most people, well, who cares? It wasn't that important. But now people realize the importance of it and what the ramifications of it are. And I think you can see the feedback that we get from our customers. It's been very, very positive.
So, okay, let's pull back now and go even bigger picture. Set aside everything you're working on at Apple. Let's just talk about society. Let's talk about human beings' well-being. What do you see in the field of technology? What do you see as the greatest opportunity and the greatest challenge over the course of the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, look, technology is a great thing and makes human beings more capable. But technology in and of itself is not for good. The people that make the technology have to make it for good. So you can't confuse one with the other. And so when we look at technology, and I think I was making a comment to you earlier today, we were talking, when I went to school, I couldn't bring a calculator into class throughout even my high school, because if I brought a calculator into class, I wouldn't know how to add, multiply, and all these other things around it. Turns out that's not really true. You learn the basics, and learning how to multiply 342 million, blah, 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 times 242 million, doing it by hand versus the calculator doesn't really matter. And so my daughter, who's now 16 and in high school, has had a calculator since she's in third grade, and she's a hell of a lot more advanced than I am. And so technology, the great thing, I mean, I envy the fact that I'm not 16 years old and able to have all of this technology available to me. You can change the world now. When I was a kid, you could barely, see outside of the place you lived. Mm-hmm. Now you know everything that's going on in the world. You could, you build an app, you can release it across the world. So I think the positives and the opportunities are huge with that. And we need companies to do great things with that technology.
Do you think the current sort of what's known as the techlash, the sort of noise out there, concerns about the influence that tech is having on us. Do you feel like those are overstated? Do you feel like those get in the way of what is ultimately a net benefit?
I don't think anything's overstated. I think when there are issues, they need to be stated and they need to be corrected.
Yeah.
And so these are legitimate issues and legitimate problems. We read a lot about fake news. That's a problem. You got to figure out how to fix those problems, and so it is worthwhile to talk about it. That doesn't mean technology is bad, and so you can't. It's not that black and white.
What is the greatest challenge for Apple as a business over the next 10 years?
Look, our challenge is it doesn't change. It didn't change 10 years ago, and it's not going to change 10 years from now. Our number one goal is to build the best products in the world that either change, enhance, make your life better. And we still think there's a huge opportunity in that. And so we care deeply. We don't want to build a lot of things. We're going to build a few things, but things that hopefully make your life better. And it happens, some things are simple, by the way. I'll give you an example today. I went to the hotel, I went to breakfast, I went back to my room to grab my bag, my key doesn't work. Because it's one of those magnetic keys, so now you got to go back down to the lobby. There's somebody waiting, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, who needs a key, right? Why can't I just open my phone? Why can't I open the door with my phone when I'm there? It knows it's me, and the W Hotel is doing that, for example. So that's a very simple problem, obviously, but nonetheless an annoying problem. And so that's one example to the other extreme of where our technology is helping, what we're doing in health, for example, where people have irregular heart rhythms. And if you have an irregular heart rhythm, you don't know. And of course, when you go to the doctor, it never shows there. And you don't really know, but you're in a resting state like I am here, and your heart rate is really elevating. You have that problem. It's a leading cause. Lots of medical issues associated with it. And with the watch on, we can tell. And so we're doing a great study with Stanford where patients are being monitored, or not patients, but customers, and hopefully not patients. And we're finding out about it, and there's a hotline they call, and they go straight to the doctor to be able to determine. I mean, that by the way, if you want to do things like to save medical costs, which is a big problem, that's a great example of something. If you could do something proactive as opposed to after the fact, it saves a ton of lives, saves a ton of medical hardship and issues by doing those kinds of things.
So when people ask me the question about the challenges and opportunities of the next decade, to me the most exciting space is healthcare and artificial intelligence. What are the ambitions for Apple in the healthcare space? Would Amazon is trying to get in on various aspects of medical supplies, medical services. Would you like to see every doctor wearing an Apple Watch? Would you like? I mean, what's Apple's play in healthcare?
Well, we'd like to use the technologies to make you healthier, and that relates to the apps today of filling the ring by exercising, which we know makes you healthier, to something like the heart rate and being able to monitor, and those are all things that are important. Health records we just announced. That you can have your health record. One of the problems when you go to medicine is your health records live in all of these different places and they never live in a single place. What if you could have all your health records on your phone? So when you went to a doctor or a specialist, they could see that. So we think there's a huge, huge opportunity, and we'd like to use our technologies and our capabilities to enhance that. As I said, one of the ways that it goes to filling the rings, it goes to the heart rate, is to try to do it proactively. And do it before the fact. If we can get people, living healthier lives, it's better for everything. Mm-hmm. Most importantly for themselves.
Right.
So that's how we try to think of it.
Let's talk about what was formerly the core product of Apple, which is music. Spotify is going public. Do you wish that you had sort of nipped Spotify in the bud several years ago? I mean, they do have sort of a crazy subscriber base. I think it's something like double what you guys have at Apple Music?
Yeah, it's look, we have 38 million subscribers, and we don't talk about our trials, and these are people that have given us a payment method, and that's then we have over 8 million trials, so I don't know how quite the numbers work, but that's really not that important. Because when you look at the number of subscribers that Spotify and us have together, and you look at the number of people that are listening to music around the world, or even something as simple as the number of people that come to visit our app store every week. We have 500 million people that visit our app store every week. And now you're talking about just north of 100 million music subs. We're like this big in the scheme of things. And so the real opportunity for music, and it's not about Spotify or us or the labels, it's about artists, is how do they get their music to everyone around the world, and how do they get compensated for that? And that's what we're trying to do. But we both have to grow by significant amounts in order to get to the numbers in which it should. Everybody in this room likes music. Mm-hmm. Everybody in this room listens to music, maybe different music.
What do you listen to?
Look, when you have a 16-year-old daughter, it's a great advantage because you listen to a lot of pop and a lot of new songs or whatever. But one of the things that I've been listening to recently, which most of you may not have heard of, is a person by the name of Ludovico Einaudi. And he's a classical piano musician. I'm not a classical person. But this person, he actually plays the piano, but he has a full orchestra behind him. And so it's like, really trying to take classical in a way with new music, and he's just incredible. And so I've become a huge fan over the last 6 months.
See, I was hoping you were going to say Kendrick Lamar.
That was it. Well, or Rihanna, which everyone's listening to if you saw her stats.
Yeah, Rihanna, what did she just passed some milestone on Apple Music?
She did. She had over 2 million streams on Apple Music. So the first artist to do that.
The thing that separates music from television is that if you are Netflix or Disney or whoever, you can go and you can buy specific premium content that is exclusive to yourself. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, you, Amazon, YouTube, Spotify, you guys are all offering the same thing in terms of the actual content. The only question is, what is the interface like for the user?
Yeah, what's the experience?
And then also scale. And at a certain point, it seems to me, if you've got iPhones going out all over the world, and Amazon has Alexa going out all over the world, then Spotify's actually screwed because they don't have the built-in hardware to.
Look, I think they're doing just fine, and the opportunity here is about growth for us and for everybody else. There's probably easily, 2 billion people that can afford or can pay for some level of music, and we have 100 million, so there's a big gap in there.
Before we move on to the last thing I want to talk about, which is really the only thing I wanted to talk to you about. What is there anything coming up at Apple? Anything that's next? Anything that you are looking forward to in terms of where all this technology and innovation is going that you're excited about that we haven't talked about?
Yes.
Tell me. Tell us.
Look, we better because that's what we do for a living, and so we're.
What happens when you launch a product and it doesn't go as well? Like, you have such a history of launching products that everybody goes crazy about. What happens when you launch a product and it doesn't, like the HomePod didn't sell quite as well as I think you were anticipating?
No, we're very pleased with the HomePod. It's a new category of product, and we think it's by far the best sounding speaker on the planet available today. It is the best musicologist that there is. In other words, musicologist is knowledge about music, so that you can be playing Born to Run and ask it who the drummer is, and it'll tell you who that is, or when the song was released, it knows more about music than anything. But ultimately, your question is, look, we don't build 100 products,
right?
And so we put all of our energies behind a few things, and the reason we do that is because in order at least for us, in order to do something great, we just don't know how to do that 100 times over. And so we've got to put all of our energies behind a few things to make them great. And so we bet everything on those products. And so we don't have 7 others that do the same kind of thing in a different way or whatever. And mainly because we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to make 7 great products of the same thing. And so, but that allows, one of the things that I've been at Apple for a long time, and Apple changed over those years. And one of the great things that Apple does today and has been doing, and I think it's one of the reasons that we've had a lot of success, is that focus on, and that focus is about saying no. It's not about saying yes. It's actually very easy to say yes to everything. It's really, really hard to say no. And so we're very, very focused, and that allows the whole company to get behind these products, to hopefully do something that's great.
What was the biggest thing you said no to in the last 2 years?
There's a million things we've said no to, because again, there's always good ideas and some bad ideas and all of that standpoint that you go through the cycle of. But at the end of the day, you got to focus on what's really, really important. And what do you think really, as we talked about, it's sort of we can talk about the puck. It's the same thing as you got to be able to see around the corner. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite lines of all is if you go to this room and you ask them, how should we make the iPhone better? I'm sure we would have lots of people that had ideas about what we should do next. And some of them, are the right things and probably the ones we're going to do. But if you want to go around the corner, you can't ask people. And it's the quote that Henry Ford did, which is, if you went to customers at that time and you asked them, if you're Henry Ford and you're doing market research, and you ask them what do they want, they would tell you they want a faster horse. They're not going to tell you they want a car. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of have to be able to think around the corner.
Do you know what's around the corner?
I hope we do.
You're not going to tell us.
No.
Fair enough. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. Are the Golden State Warriors going to win the NBA championship?
Well, since we're close to Houston, I'm sure many people in this room did want. Look, it's the reason he's asked. I'm as you saw, a big basketball fan, and so I go to a lot of Warrior games. I don't know. I hope so. It's hard.
Who is the greatest threat to the Warriors?
It is hard to win when you go to championships 3 years in a row. It's hard to stay focused. Remember, I just started with the whole thing about staying focused. And so it's hard to stay focused. And you can see the team today is not doing as well. The biggest threat, who knows? Look, Houston's the biggest threat if you look at it by record. To me personally, the biggest threat is the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think they match up very well with us, and they want to beat us pretty badly since KD came to the Warriors.
Does the fact that Rihanna just passed that milestone on Apple Music, has that mended fences between you guys after your little blow up on the court? No,
we've always I have great admiration for her. She's an amazing artist, and I'm a huge fan of her songs. So now she's not. I don't think she's a Warrior fan, but not everyone can.
Tough luck. Guys, I want to thank you so much for coming out. I hope this was illuminating and enlightening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eddy, for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it.